Former Convoy lawyer and friend of the channel, Keith Wilson, has to apologize to the Law Society after they've dismissed a complaint against him for merely voicing his opinions. Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. If you've been following this channel since the dawn of its existence, I've always had people from the Freedom Convoy here on the channel. I've had Tom Marazzo, we've sat down with Chris Barber, we've sat down with Eva Chipiuk, but a dear friend of my channel and a friend of mine personally, Keith Wilson, has come under attack. He's had to bend the knee. When you look at the censorship and retraining that famed psychologist Dr. Jordan Peterson has been instructed to undergo based on statements he made about Justin Trudeau, well, this is seemingly no different for Keith Wilson. And as his friend, I feel it's my obligation to discuss why I personally don't like what's going on here. Now, I want to make it very clear before I start going over this article and my opinions that I have not reached out to Keith Wilson as this. This is a news story that crossed my X feed. And, well, if anything were to ever happen to me, I know that friends like Keith Wilson would definitely come up and speak on my behalf. And, well, I'm just standing up for a friend when I take a look at what's going on here, because this is censorship at its finest. This is dehumanizing a man who has had a very prominent career, a man who is very highly respected within the bounds of Alberta, who also went to bat for organizers and members of the Freedom Convoy. Keith Wilson went to Ontario and to Ottawa to try and help negotiate an end to the protests by having I guess you could say a round table with government leaders, which of course fell apart at the 11th hour. Keith Wilson here, it says that the Law Society dismisses complaint over lawyers' convoy protest tweets. Keith Wilson apologized, says Society. Complaints finds ruling incomprehensible. Let's get into this. The Law Society of Alberta has dismissed a code of conduct complaint filed almost 2 years ago against one of the province's lawyers about tweets he made during the 2022 convoy protest in Ottawa. In a December 2023 document obtained by Radio Canada, the Law Society said Keith Wilson was remorseful and committed to doing better in the future. Wilson was a familiar face during the 2022 demonstrations in the nation's capital. At that time, he was part of a legal team for the JCCF, or the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, a Calgary-based charity representing some of the convoy organizers. The complaint against him was filed with the Law Society by Ottawa human rights lawyer Richard Warman in February of 2022. Warman alleged that Wilson engaged, quote, in trivialization of the Holocaust by retweeting material comparing Justin Trudeau to good old Adolf, using the hashtag, quote, Free Tamara, a reference to convoy organizers Tamara Leach, who was arrested at that time. According to Warman, Wilson's post violated different code of conduct rules, including one that requires lawyers in the course of their professional practice to not communicate with anyone in a way that's abusive or offensive. What about this communication? This is abusive and offensive on Warman's end. Warman also alleged that Wilson posted material inciting police officers to disobey their oath to uphold and enforce the law because it would benefit his clients. We're going to get into that because no, he did not. So this is typical leftist fashion when you see these kind of complaints being formed. I've had this happen on the channel many times where I'll say one thing and people will twist it around and say, well, this is what you meant by what you said. And in fact, they're just taking it out of context in order to fit their narrative. People need you to be very specific these days when talking about points, because this is what they do. They'll twist to fit their narratives every time, hands down. One tweet Wilson posted included video of Edmonton police officer who was supporting the truckers and thanking them, quote, for standing up to police officers. How dare he? How dare he post somebody's views and opinions? To the several hundred extra police now massing in Ottawa to soon raid/arrest their fellow Canadians protesting for charter rights, watch this video. Decide which side of history you are on. The world is watching, Wilson wrote on Twitter in February of 2022. So let's go over that again. To the several hundred extra police now massing in Ottawa to soon raid and arrest their fellow Canadians protesting for charter rights, watch this video, which is referring to the Edmonton police officer who was supporting the truckers and thanking them for standing up. They never said thank you for standing up to police officers. It was for standing up for everyone. The Freedom Convoy was in Ottawa to defend our charter rights that were being imposed by the government. I'm going to continue with the quote. Decide which side of history you are on. The world is watching, Wilson wrote on Twitter in February of 2022. It's important to mention, while we talk about this, despite the outrageous appeal from Chrystia Freeland, the invocation of the Emergencies Act was found to be illegal. So when Keith Wilson comes out with quotes like, decide what side of history you're on, the world is watching, that's not telling police to disobey their orders. That's not telling police, what was the exact quote he said? It was inciting police officers to disobey their oath and uphold and enforce the law because it would benefit his clients. He doesn't mention his clients anywhere in this tweet. Nowhere in this tweet. This is where, again, you're twisting his words to fit your narrative. What he was stating here is what side of history are you going to be on, because we all knew the invocation of the Emergencies Act was wrong. The threshold had not been met, and that is what the federal court has decided now. I'd be curious on Mr. Warman's stance with the federal court ruling last week, the state of the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So nowhere in here is he telling police to disobey their oath. Nowhere here is he saying that it'll benefit his clients. Warman alleged that the breach code of conduct, since lawyers acting as advocates must encourage public respect for the administration of justice and represent their clients within the limits of the law. Again, I don't see anywhere that he did that, where he violated that. He's simply stating his opinion. What side of history do you want to be on here, ladies and gentlemen? Do you want to be on the side that's protecting our charter, or do you want to be the one who's taking orders from a tyrant? Again, those are my words, not Keith Wilson's. Keith Wilson was very well constructed in how he put that tweet out. The Law Society's Conduct Committee opted to investigate the complaint by holding a private meeting between Wilson and a member of its board known as the Bencher. That approach is typically used to see if a lawyer understands their ethical obligations according to the Society's website and to provide direction on how to, quote, better address similar issues in the future. In other words, this is very akin to what happened with Jordan Peterson. Well, let's put you through some social online training, some behavioral training. Let's re-educate you so that you'll spew our message in the future and not, like, again, I could be wrong. I once again will state I have not reached out to Keith Wilson about this because I don't want to put him in that kind of a position. I'm simply covering this out of my own interests. But my understanding here is this is muzzling somebody from speaking their opinions. It has nothing to do with a violation. Maybe I'll see if Keith wants to come on the channel at some point to talk about this. But again, as my friend, I go to bat for my friends. I think this is wrong. The committee then decides after all this bencher work if a future disciplinary hearing is needed. According to the decision that Radio Canada obtained, the bencher indicated Wilson had apologized for his conduct and accepted responsibility. Now, that is important because it doesn't undergo or undo what I just said. Wilson has a good quote here. They have stated Wilson was courteous, civil, candid, and remorseful throughout the investigative process. The document said, he said he was committed to doing better and will be more careful in the future, and also acknowledged that the society expects lawyers to encourage public respect for administration of justice. Again, that's not admitting they're right, at least in my eyes. That left the bencher satisfied that Wilson understood, quote, his ethical obligation to be civil and express his beliefs with dignified restraint. Dignified restraint are two words that, again, I'm looking very critically at everything they're stating because they're so good at twisting Keith's words. It was for these reasons the document said the Conduct Committee decided to dismiss the complaint and close the file. In a statement to Radio Canada, Wilson said the Law Society was concerned, or was not concerned, quote, about the positions I took on behalf of my clients from which I've never wavered. The only question was specific words that I chose to express those positions, Keith Wilson wrote. The complaint was dismissed. JCCF, which employed Wilson at the time of the complaint, did not respond to Radio Canada's questions. Warman told Radio Canada that both the messages Wilson posted and the Law Society's decision were unacceptable. So Warman wanted them to hang him out to dry. They've concluded, okay, he regrets how he stated his statements, but we're not going to go any further. We're not going to put any disciplinary action. Warman says that's unacceptable. When you're a lawyer and you encourage police officers to break the law for the benefit of your clients, I think it's a scandal, Warman said. Where did he do that? Where did that happen? Anywhere in those tweets. He did not encourage any officers to break the law, and it certainly was never stated it was for the benefit of his clients. We're talking about moral principles. We're talking about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. The right to protest. I don't understand how that encourages public respect for the Law Society of Alberta's ability to govern their own members and uphold professional conduct, Warman said. I mean, this is disgusting. So the complaint was dismissed, and what Keith Wilson, again, maybe I'll bring him on the show, maybe we'll talk about this later in more depth. But Keith Wilson has basically said, look, I'm sorry if anything I said made you think that, but he's learned from it, and his apology, I don't believe, is in the form of saying, if I could go back and erase things, I wouldn't do it again. I think he'd be more careful about how it was constructed. What the Freedom Convoy did, we'll never see anything to the likes of that again. I don't believe, personally, that we'll see anything to that level of pushback come in the form of such a peaceful protest that was the Freedom Convoy. Now, when people talk about things like a civil war brewing or people fighting back against the government, I am very much in agreement that something could and may possibly happen at some point. I think people are getting restless. People are getting to the point where they're tired of seeing all of this messing around going on in the government, but we're also now seeing it with lawyers in Alberta being told, hey, you shouldn't have been posting tweets stating you support the Freedom Convoy or your clients. Again, his clients were never mentioned in those tweets. He simply asked, what side of history do you want to be on? This is a lawyer who knows the laws. This is a lawyer who understands the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This Warman lawyer doesn't seem to have a clue, and of course is obviously a snowflake. He's obviously upset with Keith's viewpoints, and much like the government during the lockdown saying, hey, shut up, or, it's off to the barracks for you. It seems like people's voices are still being silenced even 2 years after the Freedom Convoy made its debut in Ottawa. Let me know down below what you think. Is this a nothing burger? Are we blowing this out of proportion, or should we be demanding an apology from Warman on behalf of Keith Wilson? I think that Warman should apologize for pushing so hard, trying to silence somebody for having political views and for essentially having the balls of steel to go down to Ottawa and stand up for Canadians' rights. I've spoken to Keith Wilson in person many times, and again, I consider him a friend, and again, I will state for the last time so that there is very clear determination here that I was not contacted, I was not asked to make this video. This is my own personal opinion. I saw this story and it absolutely flabbergasted me. Keith's been busy. I believe he was at Tucker last week in Edmonton. He's had a lot of things going on, and we only catch up about every couple of months, but when we do, it's always good to hear from him. But the first time I ever sat down with Keith Wilson and talked about how lockdowns affected my family and my children, this man sat and listened to everything I had to say and was in tears, hearing about the destructive force of the government and what it did to even my adolescent children. This is a man of compassion. This is a man who understands the law. This is a man who understood people's rights. This is a man who went on his own accords to Ottawa to make a difference in one of the biggest protest uprisings to ever hit mankind, to be a part of things, to stand up for people's rights. And I think that this man is owed our thanks for everything he's done, despite the smear campaigns that have come out against him, defending the truckers, that have come out against any of the Freedom Convoy members. I've said multiple times on this channel, I'll say it again, I'll say it until I die. We owe the Freedom Convoy an unpayable debt for what they did for Canadians. And say what you will in the comments, you're free to your opinions, but I am a firm believer that the tide changed after the Freedom Convoy, that many provincial governments saw the writing on the wall as a result of the Freedom Convoy, and it ultimately changed the landscape of where lockdowns went for Canadian citizens. Let me know your comments down below. Again, I apologize, it's a long video, but again, I get passionate about these things. I hate to see such hardworking, truthful, honest human beings be pushed around like this. I don't like seeing it at all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll catch you on the next one.